Goed, wij...
Now, moving on. I was just told by the author of the book that we have display copies of in the hallway, or there were display copies there. I understand that some of you are taking a look at the display copies. Please return them, and you'll be able to obtain your own personal copy at a modest fee.
The next speaker, I would like to introduce briefly the next speaker to you. Next speaker is Dr. Stefan Svensson, Associate Professor at Lund University and responsible for the Fire Laboratory of the Department of Fire Safety Engineering. He's also a crew commander. In the presentation before the break, there was an image of a large building where a blue logo was somehow blurred out, and he laughed a little bit louder than others. I don't know why. So he will now tell us about, let's say, scientific advances and how to incorporate those in fire safety training, fire brigade training, and fire response. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Stefan, and Mr. Chairman, he said it all, but still, I'm an associate professor at Lund University, and I'm in charge of the fire laboratory, and I have two. It's a very small lab. It's an educational lab, so we do teaching for bachelor students, master students, and our PhD students. A lot of fun with those guys. Actually, one of the lab I have, it's next to the laser lab. That's kind of cool. It's a laser lab. I wonder what they do on a Friday afternoon at laser lab. I have a background. I've been there for 2 years at university. I have a background 15 years at one of the fire academies we have, MSB Ravingen. Well, some of you have been there probably. Possibly even met me. Poor guys. I'm also a crew commander with the fire service, so I'm on duty every 4th week. I get my fair share of fires, car accidents, medical calls, cats in trees. So take it that you get cats in trees as well. Okay. Frankly, I don't see the problem. Has any one of you ever seen a dead cat in a tree? A dog would be different. The dog in a tree is like... So I have a pretty interesting work day, basically. I see everything from theory to reality. I see from small scale to large scale. And I get I'm sort of enjoying to see, I get the local things, I get the international things, and I enjoy to see how theory actually works in some kind of reality. And that is a little bit to what I'm going to talk about today, where we put theory, where it meets the reality. So I'm going to talk about training, the training of firefighters and fire officers a little bit. And the main problem in training is that we have to put the training in some kind of context. And I usually wonder who does that, who puts the training in context, which context? Is it the instructor or is it the student? And how do we do that? And it's a very hard question, actually. And it's like, if we don't, we have to think about this problem. It's probably a lot larger than we think. If we don't have good training, if we miss something in training, I usually think about, the last time we had a fire fatality in an actual fire in Sweden was in 2003. And I think sometimes about how much do the training contribute to that fatality? Did we miss something? because we know there wasn't any problem with the gear. It was a severe fire, but the gear wasn't the problem. It was something else. So what if the training we provided to that guy has something to do with it? So training is very important, training of firefighters and fire officers. I'm going to sort of introduce you to the problem by showing you an image like this. That's reality. This is what we train for. This is how we train it. Do you see any differences? No? Oh, it's very dark. It's smoky. Or the other way around, do you see any similarities? Because there are. I mean, it's a fire. We get radiation, we get conduction. We have the same protective gear. We put water on the fire. You see the same things. And it's, in some sense, it's reality because it's a fire. And it's actually very dangerous. Without the gear, that guy would die. I wouldn't be here because it's me, actually. So it's we call this research. Fun research. So this is a training scenario, and this is where theory meets reality in some sense. And we can demonstrate a lot of things in this this type of scenario. All those things I said, like radiation and put water on things and stuff like that. But when we scale down things, because if I go back here, this is the large version. And we scale things down. And when we scale things down in fire, things start to happen. And it's not very easy to explain that to a trainee without any experience at all. So for a student, this is the reality. So when we here in this room, when we talk about reality, we think about this. But when you talk about reality to a student or a trainee, this is the reality. So how do you explain this reality by using this reality? So that's a pretty tricky question, actually. So the challenge here is really to, how do we get the trainee to understand reality? And we use that, and when we do that, we use models. I'm going to go back to models in a minute. I'm going to show you just a very sort of an overview, a very simple, basic firefighter training. So we're going to teach firefighters how to put out fires. So on day one, we teach them about fire behavior. We talk about fire and flame spread and how fire progressed in a room, and we talk about materials a little bit. On the second day, we talk about fire ventilation, pressure differentials. We may even use fans, perhaps. We talk about smoke and flow path and how smoke flows in the building and all that stuff. On the third day, we talk about fire suppression. So then we start to put water on the fire. And how we talk about droplets and pressure and hose lines, and we drag hose lines and stuff like that. What happens next? Where's the fourth day? And what do we do the fourth day? This is the day when we're supposed to put this together. Fire behavior, fire ventilation, and fire suppression. Do we ever do that? Yeah, well, perhaps. But how do we do it? I get the feeling here that we expect the students to do that themselves. We talk about fire behavior, and then we talk about fire ventilation. And then we talk about fire suppression. And then, since it's very obvious for the most of us, since most of us have at least some experience, we think it's so obvious that these things brings together in some sense. But for a student or a trainee, without any experience, how can we expect them to put this together in a context? Since their context, it's this. This is their context. This is our context. And it's slightly different. Slightly. more than slightly, actually. So, training is where theory meets reality. We need training. We need the theory. But we also need reality. And we have to think about what that reality looks like. It doesn't look the same for any of us in here. And it doesn't look the same for a trainee or a student. It looks very different. So we have to sort of, when we start the training, we have to start where the students are. We can't start where the instructor is, or where the fire service is. So to meet this challenge, how do we get the trainee to understand reality? To do that, we use models. And just to clarify, this is my Lego. It's not my kid's Lego, it's my Lego. It's in my office, in my shelf. So. And frankly, when I go back home tonight, I pass through Copenhagen, I'm going to buy a fire station in Lego. So. I still do that. Yeah. Yeah, that's the difference between being an instructor at MSB and being a professor at university. They pay me more. A little bit more. So every theory we present, every single step we do in training, every live burn we do, every demonstration we make for the students, it's a model. Everything is a model. Even a live burn is a model. A live burn, even in an acquired structure, the house that is supposed to be teared down, and we do burns in them, it's still a model. It's not reality, because we don't feed the house with real fuel. We don't put in a sofa and a television set and a carpet and stuff. Sometimes we do, but it's still a model. Okay. And we have to keep in mind that a model is always a simplification. It's based on assumptions, and there are restrictions to a model. And all models are wrong, but somewhat useful. We have to keep that in mind. So, by using the models, the models are the way for us to teach the students about reality. So we need good models. Not only good models, but we need good models. But since all the models are wrong, basically, we have to be very careful using these models. So again, go back to one of my first questions here. If a firefighter or fire officers get killed during an operation, to what extent do a model have an impact on that fatality? If we use a model and the guy gets killed or injured, is it the model that's wrong? Well, possibly. When we talk about models, we can talk about something is called fidelity. Fidelity describes how good the model is, really. It's a sort of a measure of realism. So a good model, depending on how you define a good model, should have a high fidelity in some sense. But it's not that simple either, because you can look at fidelity in different ways. Fidelity has at least two dimensions. There's a physical dimension, appearance, does it look real? And there's a functional dimension. Does it function as some kind of reality? Low or high? And low or high. But, and I have a few examples here, not very good examples, but still. Low functional, low physical, could be like a closed box with a burning candle inside. And you can use that in a class, and you put that in front of the students, so you can talk about, okay, we have a box with a candle inside. Almost like a house. When we approach a house fire, it's a box. There is something burning inside. So low functional, perhaps. Low physical, perhaps. High functional, low physical. When we talk about perhaps pressure differentials, you can talk about the function, you can explain in detail how things work, but it's very hard for the students to actually see the reality through that. Low functional, high physical, an image of a house fire. I mean, you don't get the function. It's a still image, but it's still a house fire. So you can see that, okay, it's a real fire. And high functional, high physical, a live fire drill in an acquired structure, perhaps. But it's not a sort of a rating of a model. In some cases, you need low functional and low physical. It can be a very good way to describe things and to show things to students. In some cases, you need high functional and high physical. So it's not a rating. It's linked to the level of the student. Which level is the student on? It's linked to the objective of the course, the training. So you probably need all of these. You need, when you start the class for a student, for day one, maybe you should start with a high functional, low physical. Or low functional and high physical. You have to think about where the student is. Having that said, I'm going to turn into a few aspects that you need to consider when you look at models, and perhaps a special kind of models that we use, training facilities. And I would assume you all have some kind of training facility if you're involved in firefighter training. First of all, the model has to be realistic. I've tried to look at how firefighters learn, and there's very little research on that, but I do get some things telling me that most firefighters, they learn by trying themselves to hold things in their hand and touch things and do things. A lot of people do that, but it seems like firefighters is the kind of breed that do that a lot more than the rest of the population, actually. So we need models that are realistic. And I would assume that those of you that are firefighters and the fire officers in the room, at some point you have been through a steel container. Yes or no? There are some nods around here. Yeah, okay. It's a steel container. That's a house. So we burn things in steel containers. And then we go to house fire. That is my house, by the way. Can you imagine how many times the students back home had burned down my house in models? I can't tell my wife about that. She's going to be mad about that. On the other hand, steel containers, I mean, they are cheap. You can buy them. You can build basically any type of structure you want to have. A few years ago, I was standing on the dock side I think it was like in Brisbane or somewhere, together with John McDonough from Australia and some of the guys. And one of the guys asked, well, if you build it with steel containers, how high can you build? And I just pointed to the other side of the dock, because that was a ship that was like 20 containers high. It's like, oh, well, go for it. So you can build a high-rise with steel containers. No problem. The thing is, you have to if you use steel containers, please do, but you have to put it in context. You have to explain to the students in some way that this is not reality, this is reality. And there is a big difference. This is steel. This is whatever material. It's brick and stone and wood and gypsum board and carpets. It's what do you call that on the walls? Tapestry? No. Wallpaper? Yeah, thank you. Probably sounds the same in Swedish as in Dutch. Tapet. Not even close. Okay. Fair enough. Sorry. We need realism in some sense, but there is a difference between realistic and realistic. So we need the training to be educational, we need the students to learn something. I mean, when I teach my students, I learn stuff every day, but that's not the point. We don't have training for the instructors to have fun. We have training for the students to learn something. So when we do that, we have to think of the training situation from the student's point of view. What do we want them to learn today? Because tomorrow they want to learn something else. We have to start where the students are and bring them up gradually. We can't start up here. We have to start somewhere where they're at. The training needs to be educational, and the models we use needs to be educational. The models needs to be, they must be open for the students to try new things. We can't tell them what to do. To some degree we can do that, but we also need them to try themselves. That's why we have to have training. The training has to be educational from a point where the students can try new things and learn from themselves. I mean, we all have plenty of experience, and we can tell thousands of stories to the students, but they still need to get the experience themselves. They need to teach. I can't teach my students anything. I can't do that. I can give them an opportunity to learn. So I can provide models and theory, but they have to learn themselves. So I have to give them that opportunity to learn. I can't teach them anything. They have to do that themselves. The training we provide, the models we have, and the training facilities we use, they have to be environmentally friendly in some way. If we have an organization, I mean, the fire service, we protect life and property, but we also protect the environment. So if we, in our training, do something harmful to the environment, doesn't that look very weird? If we burn things that releases things, toxic things to the atmosphere, or when we put water on the fire, we flush things down in the ground that is not supposed to be there. And we have, unfortunately, a few examples back home at the moment that is being discussed openly in the media. We're talking about foam and foam concentrates, especially around the airports. It's a big issue. It's not good, because if we do that, if we continue to do that and contaminate the environment, someone will shut us down eventually. So we have to deal with this before someone shuts us down. At the fire academy back home, we changed. If we go back like 20 years, we burnt everything. Those were the days. Am I on camera now? Sorry. Can we cut that out on the camera? Sorry. We use plastic. We use diesel fuel. We burnt cars. We took in real cars and burnt them with plastic and everything. Am I the only one who has done that? Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir. And your name is? So we changed. So we're using propane, and we use wood. But, I mean, and we even changed from particle board to wood. It's not a big difference. We changed from diesel fuel to propane. But this is CO2 only. I can still see it's better to use propane, perhaps. But then, I can go back to realism a little bit more. If I use propane, does the fire get realistic? We still get radiation and convection and conduction and stuff like that. But so if we use propane, and we do that during training, and we give that image of reality to the students, that will be their image of reality. So when they're finished in training and they go to the first fire, and it's like, crap, this is not a propane fire. No, it's not. And we know that. But they don't know that. But we still need to deal with, we have to do that. We have to. This is a tricky one. This is probably the hardest one, because we want to have our training to be safe, 110% safe all the time. We don't want anything to happen in training for several reasons. One is, if something happens in training, they're going to shut the training down. Someone will do that eventually. The thing is, at the same time as the training is 100% safe, we want the student to believe the situation they are approaching is very dangerous, because we want them to, again, we want to have a realistic scenario. So we want them to believe it's very dangerous, but we want it to be 100% safe. So, okay, we have a training facility, we have a model that is 150% safe. It's so safe that you can't imagine it. It's safe. But if the student, the trainee, think it's unsafe, even if it's technically and organizationally safe, if the student think it's unsafe, it's going to be unsafe. So this is a tricky one. So even if I want to have 100% safe, we can't get there, because we still want to have a realistic scenario so the students think it's unsafe. So this is going to be. But I still believe, I don't have the solution for that yet, but I think that through technical things and organizational things, we can make it somehow. And of course, a little bit about the conference here. We need, in the training, we need science, but we also need experience. We need experienced instructors to sort of tell the students about how things work, but we also need to back that up with science. And there's been a lot of science aimed at the fire service the past 10 years, 15 years. We know some stuff. We don't know everything. In the cases we don't know anything or everything, we still need to rely on experience. So we need experience. The problem is that experience is something that exists in here. So we have to get it from here to the student. And how do we do that? Because you have not the same experience as I have. And you have a different experience. And you have a different. And you have a different. And what is experience? We talked about that just a minute ago. What is experience? I got my first firefighter training 28 years ago, believe it or not. At the moment, with the fire station I'm at, we get about 2 calls per week. So basically, I have almost 30 years of experience working with fires, okay? I get about 2 calls per week, every 4th week. So I get about, 25 calls per year. 1/3 are fires, 1/3 are medical calls, and 1/3 are car accidents. How much experience is that, really? I have 30 years, but the past year I have 25 calls. Well, experienced, but well, maybe not that experienced anyway. So. There's a difference between experience and experience. But we need it, and we need science. We need more science, of course, and we need to mix this up in a very good way, in some sense. How am I on time? Doing good? Ah.
10 minutes left.
Oh! Crap. Okay, now we have to think of all these things at the same time. Realism, educational, environment, safe, experience, science. And this brings us to the problems, and I mentioned a few already. We use diesel fuel and we use plastic. Okay, here we go. And we get problems here, and we get problems here. How do you shut off? If you get problems in a training facility, in a model, and you have a liquid fuel, how do you shut off the fire? You don't. If you have a gas burner, you just push a button and you turn off everything. If you use only science, you might actually get in conflict with experience and the other way around. And you might get problems to get it educational. I mean, how do you, since a lot of firefighters, trainees, they are sort of practical people. They want to feel things and touch things and do stuff. And you start the first day in a classroom talking about fire theory. It's going to be like, after 15 minutes. But we still need to do it. So we have to figure out sort of a clever way to get the science to make it educational in some way. I don't have the solution, but I have a few steps towards the solution, perhaps, and a few ideas. From theory to large scale, we have to start in the small scale and work our way up to the large scale. I have seen some very crap examples in training where they put, on day one, they teach the students how to drag a hose line and open a nozzle and close it again. On day two, they put the students in a steel box, a live burn, that size, sort of. That is not training. That is not educational. That is just show off and scare them. So we have to work. I mean, you can, and we do that. I can do this. I can start there, but if I do that, I bring a whiteboard to the training grounds. So I start with 5 minutes. Okay, guys, we're going to look at this in here, and then I start to talk about that. I mean, then we do some training exercises in here, and we go out again, and then we talk about this again. And then I can get the students to understand, okay, I can see how it works with density and velocity and height and gravity and everything, pressure. We can do that. It's not that hard, actually. Models. I talk about models, and I've mentioned training facilities, and I've probably planted that thing in your heads by now. But we have a variety of models. We have small scale, large scale training facilities, but we also have like software. We can use case studies. I mean, we've seen examples here today and yesterday from real fires, and you can show them. You can talk about them. You can even do calculations, which is, I mean, the actual calculations can be very hard, but it's not very hard to sort of understand your examples. It's not that hard. I don't think so. Role play, study visits. You can take the students, go out in the field and look at a house, or look at where they had a fire yesterday, perhaps. And you can use scale models. And you have to think about fidelity versus objective. I mean, you don't always want to have high fidelity. Sometimes low fidelity can be very good, depending on the level of the students, of course. And back again to training facilities. We have to design the models, which we call training facilities, in specific ways. We use steel containers, and they are useful in some cases, not always. So we have to think about what materials. It's a very different, there's a huge difference between a steel wall and a brick wall and a gypsum board wall. We can put in some safety features like this. It's from Reivinge. Surveillance. We have technology today, so we can put in surveillance inside the building. We can have cameras. We can have infrared cameras. We can have not GPS, but locators, so we can actually see on a map where the guys are. The technology is there. It's just imagination and, of course, so money. And there are a number of other pedagogical aids we can use in our training. Use Lego, build a house, build a fire station, and make them understand, okay, this is the model. You have to make them also understand that the model is a model. What we do in training are models. You have to explain that to them. And this is the most important of all, the instructor. This is a good friend of mine, a great guy, an Irish, my favorite Irish, by the way, one of them. I can't teach my student anything. I said that earlier. But as an instructor, we are still a key component in the training because we're the guys that provide the environment where the students learn stuff. So we don't need good instructors, we need great instructors. We need instructors that they themselves have to understand what they are talking about to the students. They have to understand the full picture. They need experience, at least some experience, but they also need some kind of theory in their background. We need guys with 1 foot in the science world and 1 foot in the fire service world. And they don't come by very cheap or very often or by the dozen, but we have to find them. We need people who can sort of link things together all the way from small scale to large scale, from theory to reality. Because we want to train our students, our trainees, to understand the real reality, not the training reality. It's very different. It's about context. And it's the context, it's not only the training facilities or the models or the theories. It's all of us. It's the fire academies, it's the instructors. But it's also the people actually working at the fire stations. We are all within that context, and it's all of our responsibilities to teach our students how to do, how things works, and we have to bring science and experience together in some kind of a sweet harmony. And that is not easy, but it's very important, and it's an obligation we all have to do that. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Stefan, for this very interesting presentation. It has really shown how complex it is to train people, or actually better to say, to prepare firefighters for the actual situations, the reality that they're going to face. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah.
You had your comment already. Oh, sorry.
Okay. So next question. No.
No, I'm sorry. Please, go ahead.
I really appreciate your explanation of the difficulties in instructing students for fires, but actually accidents are quite rare. How is that possible, given all these hurdles you have outlined? Why aren't we bringing out the body bags every week? Your last experience is from 10 years ago.
Okay, I'll just repeat the question. So the question is, if instructing is so difficult, has so many hurdles, how come that actually only few fatalities or accidents occur?
Or do we have under-registration, which is possible?
Or do we have under-registration?
No, I don't think so. We might have under-registration on injuries, but that's another thing. I think that it's what would you call that in English? Self-preservation. I mean, most people, if they approach a dangerous situation, they would like, I'm not going inside on that one. You understand that by sort of nature. The exceptions generally, and some people would probably argue against me, but the fatalities you see is where people go beyond the threshold in some way, because they have some kind of, there's some kind of expectation from the public to do things. It's a house, it's on fire. We're supposed to go inside and do something. And when you pass the threshold of that what was the word again?
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation. And you do that sometimes, because we have some kind of pressure to do that from the public and from the culture, the fire service culture, have that pressure itself. It's like a sort of heroic thing. We're supposed, yeah? Yes?
Well, the evidence in the Netherlands suggests that these fatal accidents are really quite banal. They are run-of-the-mill scenarios. People run out of air with a bottle on their back and
Yeah.
can't find their way out
Yeah.
in time.
That's probably the other end to it, that I mean, you can look at what's the most type of injuries you have in the fire service here in Holland?
Football.
Okay. We have that as well. We have about
Most
60%
frequent
in
injury
Sweden.
is
So,
football.
but if we take out those 60%, what's the rest? Burn injuries? No.
I have no statistics, so I'll leave
No.
that to you.
It's probably a strained ankle, a broken thumb, and all those things. And they come from where you... I think the problem is that if you see a fire, you consider that to be dangerous, so you don't go there. But the small things, like you jump down from a ladder, you're supposed to climb all the way down, but you have 2 steps and you jump down, and then you get injuries. And like you said, the small things like the air balls, it might be that I'm just thinking out loud here, but it might be that in many cases you rely on the air so much that you forget about it. You have the face piece on and you just go on forever, and then you forget to check because you rely on the air. So, like you said, we miss the easy bits, but I think there's another thing to it as well. It's when you sort of, you push yourself over the threshold of self-preservation, and you go into something that you know somewhere that I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but someone expects me to do something about this. And that's when you get problems with it. It's an interesting question, though. It is.
Yes, please.
We lose our firefighters not in fighting residential fires, but very big fires,
Yep.
big, large-scale
Yep.
size. How can we train them to do that better?
We lose our firefighters usually not in small residential fires, but in very big-scaled fires. How can we prepare our firefighters for that?
I can't prove it yet, but if I look at the Swedish fire service, if we look at how we are organized and the staffing, we are primarily organized to handle apartment fires and residential fires. So we are pretty good at that tactics. I think the problem is, and it could be the same here, that we apply the same tactics in every situation, even in large-scale fires, where we should have some other tactics to it. So it's a fire, it's a house, it's on fire, and we go inside. Well, you can do that in a residential fire because we have a building code in this part of the world that actually allows us to do that. We have compartmentation, and we have brick walls, and we have whatever. And we can do that. But in a large structure, we should probably do something else, or leave it to burn. Think about this facility here. This is pretty complex. You go in, and you go downstairs, and downstairs you have a large room. And I would assume there are escape routes somewhere, and you can actually go in there. But it's still not a residential fire. It's something else. But my guess is that if we get a fire in here, most of us would probably use the same tactics. 2 guys inside a hose line. Here we go. And then you pass the threshold. We use the wrong tactics for this type of building. I think that might be one key to it, unfortunately. And the problem is, if I bring it back to the models, how do you create a model with a like this? Or my first image, this large fire. How do you create a training facility with a 1,000 square meter area? You can do it, but...
Or 10,000.
Yeah.
Okay, for reasons of time schedule, I think we will stop the questions here. Thank you very much, Stefan, for this presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much.